Good evening. Happy Feast of Mary, Mother of the Church, and happy Memorial Day to all who celebrate. Going to start tonight off with a couple of announcements. First off, as you may see in the stream title, tonight's going to be a short stream. The reason for that is I leave for Washington, D.C. tomorrow, going to be driving for a very long time, and I need a little bit of extra sleep. So we're only going to be going an hour tonight, and so I'll keep my opening remarks brief. And since I'll be in Washington, D.C., as you can see on the ticker down below, we're switching from Central Time to Eastern Time. So you will have to adjust your watch if you wish to participate in this while it is live. Now, many of you are probably familiar with the periodical First Things, conservative religious magazine I came across when I was in seminary, and I've had a subscription to it ever since I've become a priest. And sometimes there's some really good articles in there, sometimes there's some middling articles in there, but there's always something in there worth reading. And I was absolutely delighted by the headline article tonight, or this the June and July issue, "Homophobia" by Mary Harrington, talking about just the complete inability for people in the year of our Lord 2026 to hear and understand a lot of these, Thomistic Aristotelian principles, right? So I'll just summarize the article briefly here. She starts off by, her experience of becoming a mother at the age of 38, and trying to write about her experiences. She wrote a book on feminism first, and she said, I wanted to talk about what I was experiencing, as a mother, and I didn't have the language for it. Just couldn't put into the words the things that she was experiencing. The thing that broke this open for her was reading a commentary, or maybe more of a textbook on Thomistic Aristotelian Platonic metaphysics by Dr. Ed Feser, who is a reliable commenter on these things. And that's where she was introduced to, the notions of potency and act, and potency as being a real thing in the universe, right? So that's was a new idea for her. The idea of essences being internal to a thing and actually having an important function in the organizing and the structuring of the thing, and being introduced to the four Aristotelian causes: formal cause, material cause, efficient cause, final cause. And how this, this addition of this, robust philosophical language started helping her to put into correct words what she was doing as a mother. A child has a certain essence to it. It's got a certain, thing that's real about it. But much of that is in potency right now. It needs to be brought out, needs to be drawn out into act. And that's quite a bit what mothers and fathers and all sorts of people do with their children, is begin to draw that potency into act. A baby couldn't roll. Now the baby can roll. Now the baby can crawl. Now the baby can stand. Now the baby can walk. Now the baby can talk. Now the baby can run. Things are now a little out of control, but that's perfectly normal, and everything's happening according to plan. So you can imagine then, it wasn't just, the fact that she didn't have the words, she didn't have the concepts, joined with the words to be able to articulate these things. And the second part of the article from First Things here by Mary Harrington, it talks about how there's basically like I don't quite want to call it a conspiracy, but maybe we could call it a conspiracy to banish these sorts of concepts from our language and from our thoughts, and linking the scientific method with the pursuit of knowledge, and power and all of those sorts of things, which is, I think, it makes sense to me. Now, here's what I'm curious about. I basically, I love the article. It's free on the First Things website. I maybe should put a link to that at some point, but you can read it for yourself. There's an awful lot of it that's true. But when you strip potency and act as real categories, essential forms as real categories, and formal and final cause out of the universe, that's basically just a recipe for materialism right there. Just a materialistic understanding of the universe. Everything is just matter and energy. And what's really curious to me is, how is that idea propagated? She's got a story in here about people despising the schoolmen and choosing to pursue power via knowledge, and that's that accounts for part of it. That accounts for what's going on in the academy, right? And maybe that could trickle out into the populace. But how is it that not only the words were taken from her, but the very concepts were taken from her? And I noticed in my own formation, in a good Catholic household where we went to church every Sunday, and I did many years in a Catholic school, I got a lot of useful things, and I'm grateful for my my upbringing there. But those concepts weren't in me either. I didn't learn about this in the seminary. So the question that I want to ponder tonight, and I want to ponder with all of you with the time that we have, is what is the mechanics, right? What is the process by which people are kept from these insights? How does this propagate itself? Because I could look back at my religious formation, and I could see lots of ways that worked. We made it to church every Sunday. We did prayers at home. There were catechism classes. There were conversations, with my parents. There was, Bible reading and praying the rosary and all of those sorts of things. It's I can see that. I understand how that works. But what are the mechanics by which people are trapped in materialism? So please, intelligent people of the internet, come here and help me out. Yeah, when I saw when I saw this come in the mail, I knew you had mentioned the talk at the Symbolic World Summit, and I thought of you immediately. And friend of the show, Mark, he found the link for us. So if you wish to review this on your own time, then you can go read that article right now. But right now, we're actually going to talk and explore these things with the panel of experts. Mark,
I'm no expert, just to be clear.
Okay.
I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in anything except using the restroom and tying my shoes.
Okay, well, that's a good start. We can work with that.
That's yeah, I found the link for you, Father. Her talk at Symbolic World was really good because she did mention homophobia, and I was like, man, if Father Eric were here, he'd be standing up cheering.
Well, I'm standing up cheering now.
Instead
Mrs.
of
Harrington.
Instead of standing up in protest like you did at the first summit, which was remarkably successful. So, hey, whatever works. Yeah, I think I'm a little disappointed in you, Father. I'm just a tad disappointed in you. I got to tell you, your framing is backwards. It's not what's keeping us, we'll say, actively from these concepts or stuck in materialism. It's easier to think of this in terms of a flood of materialism. And I'll just point to this again in case I haven't on your particular channel. Just look up the work of Dale Farron. And actually, that actually explains everything, honestly. When you don't have formation in the, Peterson would call it rough and tumble play, right? When you're lacking that formation, you're missing a bunch of information about the world that allows you to engage with those concepts. And if you don't get them early enough, or if you don't get them for long enough, which is what Dale Farron's work shows. Both of those things separately, by the way, they're two separate axes. Then what happens is you have worse outcomes, like throughout your life. She's done, basically, I think 20-year studies or something completely off the charts, to demonstrate this. And my thesis is that instead of having that formation, you're just given more facts, and so you need to kind of give those up to get back to what we would call the poetic way of informing the world.
Okay,
right.
So let's imagine
it's a capacity issue,
and let's imagine then, right, that this formation isn't something that's necessarily going to be permanent. So you could have something and lose it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you do all the time.
Yeah, and it may be the case that, like, when a child is young, parents are very attentive to, you need to get outside, you need to play, you need to exercise, you need to go make friends.
Some parents are. Yeah.
Sure. Let's imagine a scenario, right? Let's imagine a scenario where this is in fact happening. And as the child gets older, it seems to be becoming more responsible, is then given free access to the internet, or maybe, restricted, but perhaps not quite as restricted as could be helpful, right?
Right.
They could actually lose their contact then with the things they used to have, this very real involvement with other children and all these sorts of things, and then be bombarded with a flood of information, because the internet is that, if nothing else, a flood of information. And now they could actually lose that contact with these things. And so when you try and introduce the concepts to them, it seems unreal.
Yeah.
Well, that's the meaning of, the crisis of faith, people that fall into the meaning crisis. That's what you're describing there, right? And we know this is, we already know, we have the data. It's called COVID, or the fake news virus scamdemic, if you want to be accurate and precise. And so we know what happens. Like, we know that happened. That definitely happened. And the problem is it's masked by another issue. And the other issue is that because, as Pastor Paul Vanderklay says, we outsource our sanity, they also go insane, many of them, because the formation that they had has crumbled, in essence, and they can't get it back because of the loss of the skill. At the same time, that's more the issue. But you have to think about this in terms of a lack. So the meaning crisis people, the Sam Harrises of the world, they're never getting those concepts. That's not going to happen.
Unless the miracle of God's grace.
Yeah.
Well, there's always that possibility, unless something, really traumatic happens to them. And so you kind of see this with Jordan Peterson, right? Like, Jordan Peterson has all these traumatic things, and his science keeps failing him. And then, his wife has a, no other word for it, miraculous recovery, right? His daughter has a miraculous recovery before that, but his wife has a bigger miraculous recovery, if such a thing exists. This doesn't lead him reliably to where it should, by all accounting, right? Because he's still missing, some of those concepts. And it's not that he's, we'll say, entirely missing the concepts, but he's missing the aspects that would lead him down a path.
Yeah.
Right? So he knows the things out there, but he can't reach it because there's no path for him to reach it on, because he doesn't have the deep poetic way of knowing the world that would be required to orient towards the concepts in a three-dimensional space.
Yeah. Well, so I am curious, Fuzzer, when you're talking about why people are attracted to materialism, do you mean materialism in a sense of basically hoarding of like economic goods, or do you mean in a sense of the idea that everything is physical?
Yeah, the reduction of the entire universe to matter and energy.
Okay, well, so
prime mover thereof, because nobody's a physicalist reductionist, as Verveke points out. Nobody.
So I think the argument that I've heard from some people, like for example, the philosopher and cognitive scientist Daniel Dennett, is that you can reduce consciousness to brain functions because qualia, in his view, only serves in the functional context of neuronal states. So it serves to organize neuronal states. Now, I don't agree with this, but that's his argument for materialism, is that if you subtract any functional view, you don't get anything else.
Yeah, or I could say that my mother loves me, and that's a quality that's uncapturable by science. Like
Right. Yeah. The problem
that.
with Dennett is everything he says is wrong. All of the evidence points in the exact opposite direction of what he says. And he talks a lot and shows no evidence for anything that he ever says, because that evidence doesn't actually exist. So it's nice that he says stuff that's wrong, but also it's wrong. So that it's the wrong part I'm focused on here, not the fact that he gave you a cute story, right? And yeah, it's easy to not believe his ridiculous story because it's ridiculous. But the question is, why would anybody listen to him? Which is, I think that's more where Father Eric's getting at, is how do we get to the state in society where anybody would be fooled by such utterly devoid of IQ and thought as Dennett's ridiculous?
Well, and not only that, but like if you follow that, like you follow that train of logic 2 steps down, all of a sudden nothing's real anymore, nothing matters anymore.
Right.
And like, boy, that's going to cause problems, isn't it? So that's where I like, so I'll admit something, and maybe it's not quite as severe as I made it sound, but like the kid who spent a lot of time when he was very young playing outside, and then had a little bit too much time in front of a screen as a teenager. That was me, and I don't think my parents were quite aware of just how much time I spent on a computer, and it wasn't all bad stuff, but a lot of it was garbage, like junk food, spiritual junk food, right? We can call it that. And that's the most cogent explanation, because I noticed when I got to seminary that I had all this materialism in me, and I had to kind of sweat it out over the years, right? And I had enough of that old formation, right? I could get a fair amount of that back. I could live in community with the guys. I could do the prayers. I could do everything that was asked of me, and enjoyed it for the most part. So, but just being flooded with information is the most cogent explanation of how that could have happened to me. A good kid who came from a good Catholic household is just that flooding of information that was concomitant. And it's not like I was the worst case out there. I still played football. I was in the musical. I did have friends, but like everything you hear about, social media usage and personal isolation, like that applies to me pretty well in high school. I didn't have quite as much contact as maybe I would have liked. We'll say that.
Yeah. Well, so I have a friend who's himself a Dennett-style physicalist, and his argument is this. If you take the Bayesian idea that we should update our beliefs given new evidence, given our priors, we look at the fact that we have evolved brains. And so given that phenomenal consciousness seems to be correlated with evolved brain states, then there's not really a reason to posit anything beyond evolutionary functionalism.
Well, except we actually don't have any experience of having evolved brains.
Yeah, that's all nonsense. First of all, he didn't read Bayes, obviously. That's not Bayesian at all. This is not what Bayes says, period, end of statement. So he's wrong about that. The other thing is that you still need to explain evolution, so that doesn't solve a problem. It just moves the problem further down. And third is, as Father rightly pointed out, you don't experience evolved consciousness. That's not a thing. And consciousness, as scientists know, and Kirk, I've got to encourage you to go to the Mark of Wisdom Discord channel and click on the important video that I posted that actually came from RJ, not from me, where the scientists are discussing what the older scientists, a la Einstein and those guys, were talking about with respect to linking things like physics and psychology together correctly. And you will find, if you listen closely enough, that these are basically all my positions. And I was like, well, so there are scientists who wrote whole books and papers on everything I've been telling people about science, and they were the big boys. They were, Freud and Heidegger, not Heidegger. What's the what's that physicist's name? I can't remember now.
Heisenberg.
Heisenberg, thank you. Yes. Heisenberg and Einstein and guys like that wrote very, very similar stuff. They all knew each other too, about how science has limitations. It doesn't do these things that we think it does. And you can, although there's a Q&A in there that says otherwise, but he's just wrong. You can map the physics math onto the psychological pretty easily, or onto what they're calling it second order cybernetics, which is a term I hadn't actually heard, but oh my goodness, there you go. That's pretty much everything I talk about. And so that's part of the problem, is that if you've taken a system, we'll call it the Aquinas system for understanding the world or something, and you've replaced it with the science materialist system for understanding the world, and you can only hold one of those two things, and you weren't given the Thomas Aquinas system, then what do you expect to happen, right?
Yeah.
So AP asks, is it homophobia, or is it people don't want to take the time to learn the language? I know that every time I hear the words like first cause, formal cause, I tend to check out. So that might just be nerdophobia, and that's fine. And people can actually do fairly well without ever having learned this stuff. Mary Harrington specifically talking about academics and thinky talky types who don't have any access to these ideas. Like you can dazzle somebody by talking about teleology, and then they'll be like, oh my gosh, that's a fancy word. Okay, do you know how to make soup? Right. And then you just break it down. It's like, okay, the soup is the end goal, and then here's the broth and the vegetables and the meat and all that. That's the material cause, right? And the efficient cause is you chopping it up and putting it into it and boiling it. And that gives you the final cause of the eating of the soup, and it tastes good. The formal cause. So if you can just understand what all that means pretty quickly, then you're fine, and you don't need the language necessarily. It's more important to do these things than it is to be able to talk about them. But it is a problem when people are talking a lot and are professional talkers and don't have not just the words, but the concepts.
Yeah,
that's the
important part. There's 2 points. There were 2 points in her talk.
Here's another very practical. Sorry, Mark, I'll let you finish. But another very practical thing, right, is I remember talking to a buddy of mine. He's a priest now. We were in seminary, and a bunch of the gay marriage stuff had just gone through the nation, Obergefell and all of that, and he recalls talking to his grandpa about this, and his grandpa's like, this is so stupid. The parts don't fit. And that's all he said about it, right?
Yep.
I guarantee you, old man didn't know about the 4 causes. He didn't know about substance and accidents and hylomorphism, but he actually knew about these things. He knew how the world worked. And, so yeah, it's more important to be able to navigate these things than it is to be able to talk about them.
Yeah, and it was 2 points in her talk. One was they don't have the concepts, and 2 was because they don't have the concepts, they are afraid to have the discussion. And fair enough, because if you don't have 4 causes, and science can't do 4 causes, it can barely do 1 sometimes, and never on anything important, which is good to know, right? Then what are you going to do? The language won't help you in that case. But what happens pretty reliably, and you see this with Vervaeke all the time, and I love Dr. Vervaeke, but also he does this all the time. He'll use one of the terms, he'll use the language, but the concept is completely different. And a lot of people don't notice, and fair enough, a lot of people are terrible with language. I mean, they say crazy things like social justice. That's not English. Can't convey ideas, right? Or they'll make wild claims about a social contract, which is impossible. It's a contract, a written document. They're just breaking the language. And so why would they notice that Vervaeke was using the word emanation in a completely different way from the way any religious person will call them would use the word emanation? No one would notice that. They won't even push back on social contract and social justice and other crazy uses of the language and claims that people make about things. How are they going to catch something that subtle? But it's right there, and Peterson does the same thing, obviously, unfortunately. And so they look like they're getting agreement because language is tricky and slippery and really imprecise, and so you can fool yourself into agreement pretty easily with language, which is why it doesn't tend to change people's minds, right? You go back to the Peterson Sam Harris debate. No one moved in that debate, no one at all. They both dug their heels in because, to be fair to them, they were both right to their points. Just if you're a nitwit, you identify with Harris because his formulations are easier for you. Whereas Wright, I think it was the first debate, but maybe it wasn't. Right in the beginning of one of the debates, Sam Harris says, well, the Bible's no big deal because I could write a cookbook and make it just as interesting or just as symbolic or some other complete. It's a nonsense statement. It's clearly not true.
It'd be a stinking bestseller. You know how many Bibles get sold every year?
He would
make so much money.
He would do it in an instant because he's that greedy, and he didn't. And he didn't do it because, of course, he can't. And the problem, from my perspective, is Peterson just chuckles and blows it off. And I would have taken that and shoved it so far where the sun don't shine on Sam Harris that he would have regretted the day he was born, because I would have made him look silly, because that is a silly statement to make. There's no freaking way. First of all, Sam Harris is not that good an author anyway. And he's certainly not that good a thinker, right? But second of all, it's so absurd to think that any one person could do that this whole time and has never done it. That's ridiculous. The odds against that are infinitely against it. It's impossible for that not to have happened if it were possible to happen. Sorry, like there's too much motivation. And it's not like people haven't tried. I read Dianetics, interesting book. And it's not like they don't meet with some measure of success, but is that success a tenth of the success of this weird book called the Bible? No. So obviously, real authors who can actually kind of write, because L. Ron Hubbard's not terrible, he's not great, and he's not Tolkien or anything, they can't manage it. I mean, Tolkien didn't sell as much as the Bible. He's probably the closest you're going to get for a single author. So Sam Harris's whole idea is laughable. But the problem is, it was met with laughter, which is the appropriate response if you're Peterson and you know better. But all the Harris fans have already agreed to the thesis. So they think, you can't counter Sam Harris's argument, even though it's a ridiculous claim. It's an insane claim.
Exactly. I mean, Harris and his acolyte, I don't think are going to be reachable. I mean, I don't think even Dawkins is reachable, and Dawkins is a little bit more reachable than Harris.
Well, that depends. It depends on what strategies you use and whether or not you're even aware that they don't have access to the concepts, and that there's a strategy that you have to employ, and that maybe there's no way to do it, with masses of people in a debate. Although I might argue with that. That would put me under a lot of pressure to prove it, but I'd try it at least, because I think I have a better chance of pulling it off than most people, because I understand the problem. That's why I was very happy with Mary Harrington's lecture at the Symbolic World Summit. I thought it was fantastic.
And
for that
lots
reason.
of thinky-talky people have read it, because it was the headliner article in First Things. So
and it's everybody will miss the importance. So here's as secular a person as you can get, newly out of feminism, still bought into postmodernism. They're still everybody there pretty much was trying to save postmodernism for some stupid reason that they could not explain. And yet she notices this phenomena that is clear. It's clear as day that, even people in the 80s were noticing, hey, everyone's sort of pooing Aristotle. Well, of course they are, right? I mean, if you're poo-pooing Aristotle, you're gonna go ahead and poo-poo Aquinas, because that's not quite the same thing, but one builds on the other, guys. So if you throw that out, You're going to
Mhm.
throw this out too, right? You have not much choice. And so for her to notice that and notice the two aspects of it as somebody who is in it is a big deal. It's like a really big deal. This is like a ground shaking moment. Now, I don't think anyone in any of the churches is going to be able to take advantage of it, unfortunately, which hurts me greatly. But it's a ground shaking moment to sort of open up the discussion to realize, oh no, this isn't a language problem. This is a concepts problem, and we need to fix the concepts problem in order to have the communication flow again. Because all the church people are still scratching their heads about Peterson and Vervaeke not just moving into the church, because what choice do they have logically? And that's correct. They have no logical choice, but that's not how people operate. Obviously, as evidenced by them and every other person you've ever met, people are rarely logical. And so they don't know what to do about it. They're just puzzled by it, right? They kind of treat it like a reverse miracle. Like, well, there's a reason for this, and you could fix it if you knew what you were doing, and fair enough that you don't. But also maybe start, opening your brain up to the fact that maybe there's a bigger problem here than we realize, and it's not just a language and discussion issue.
Yeah, exactly. I do think I did have a question for Professor Eric, but I think someone in chat asked a question.
No, not anything that I'm working at right now.
Okay. So I did have a question on the question related to Dennett and the mind as understood by Thomas. So does so Thomism is compatible, correct me if I'm wrong, Father, with the idea of the subconscious, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't use that kind of Freudian language, but certainly you have habits, and then you've got certain conditions of perception. This is actually, it was a really useful breakthrough for me when I was writing my undergraduate thesis, and undergraduate theses usually aren't worth reading, but it was worthwhile for me to do it. So thanks be to God for that. When they it was Sister Prudence Allen, RSM, writing about the differences between men and women, and her conclusion was on an intellectual level. Women tend to consider certain types of information more certain types of information, and men are more attuned to other types of information, and that's where the biggest differences do that. So they have identical intellects, right? You have a human soul, and it's a human soul that brings us all into unity. Therefore, it's not distinguished between male souls and female souls. But the structural differences in the brain on the averages, because there's always going to be exceptions, and we just don't worry too much about the exceptions until they show up. So yeah, there's definitely and that's not something that people are consciously in control of, so it can certainly be mapped into the subconscious.
So my question was, I was watching an interview between Kurt J. Mungle and the American linguist and cognitive scientist Noam Chomsky, where he was saying that, in his view, there are contents of the unconscious that are inaccessible to the conscious mind. And so he gives the example of Jung's archetypes, where the Jungian archetypes are not something you can bring to phenomenal consciousness. I'm curious if the idea that there's contents of the unconscious that are in principle never accessible to phenomenal consciousness is compatible with Thomism.
Yeah, well, it's hard to, so we talk about this in terms of like habits, right? And that's, and when we say habits, we don't just mean, when I wake up, I use the bathroom and then brush my teeth and then get a cup of coffee. And I do this so routinely that it's automatic. But, a habit comes from the Latin word to have or to hold. So you have this, as a part of you, right? So you can develop the qualities of courage, where you can face adversity for a worthy goal and do so in a way that's admirable, right? And it's hard to talk about, like, how does your consciousness, right, your sensation of being behind the eyeballs and focusing your attention, like how would your consciousness interact with a habit? You could only really interact with a habit when it's an act, right? When you can see wow, I actually, managed to go up and ask her to dance with me, and even though I sweat right through my deodorant, like that was so worth it, at the sixth grade dance, and all of that. So, so yeah, it's like that these habits would definitely not be, accessible to your conscious mind. That's not the sort of faculty that your soul has. You can't like open it up like it's a stat screen and say, okay, I need to go do my math homework. I'm going to take all of my charisma points and put them into intellect for the time being. It's like that's not how this works there. And same with like your passions, right? Your passions can be more or less inflamed. They can be, you can cultivate, certain passions, and you can do that in a good way and a bad way, right? So you could cultivate constant gluttony by eating all the time, every time you feel hungry. Like you're not going to have direct access to that. You're just going to feel them when they're active in you. So yeah, it's obviously your consciousness doesn't access the underlying, we'll say the underlying structure that makes that happen. But it does access it when it's in act, right? Because it's potential, isn't it? Yeah. These are just
this potentials. This is much easier. Freud and Jung read Thomas Aquinas. Almost anybody who went to university or college of any kind back then read Thomas Aquinas for sure, 100%. And so they're all building all of this stuff on top of Thomas Aquinas. And this is exactly Mary Harrington's point, is that people are, quote, rediscovering him by using people who used his work and then not realizing that the people's whose work they're stealing from or building off of used him. They just have no awareness of this, even though they could if they took 2 seconds to look it up.
Now Harrington in this article does like make these points about, and you can read this certainly in Aquinas kind of gets banished outside of Catholic circles. I much more easily would believe that they would have read Aristotle than Aquinas. I guess that's what I'll say. And
no, they read Aquinas too, almost certainly.
Yeah.
Okay. The education system was vastly different before 1940, something like that. But like it changed completely. Like the idea of a classical, when people refer to a classical education, they're not referring to the education they got. They may think they are, but they're not. What they're referring to is the education that happened in the early 1900s that their professors had. Mm-hmm. That's because people look to their exemplars. So actually, it's 2 to 3 generations back from them, usually, right? Because it attenuates. So the people at the top still get a classical education, right? So effectively, as more and more colleges and universities sort of proliferate outside of the Ivy League, the Ivy League doesn't change that fast. But they were new, so they didn't follow the pattern very well for whatever reason. Maybe it was a good reason, maybe it was a bad reason. And so that's what actually happened. But what a lot of those people got were pieces of a classical education, right? But to be classically educated meant something very specific in like the 1920s, very specific and very clear. And, the universities were based on the big 4 things, right? One of them is what we would now call religious studies, but, they had a different formula for that. That formula went away around that time. Mm-hmm. And so even Peterson didn't get a classical education. If he thinks he did, he's crazy.
I mean, first off, like when you were a boy, you had the Latin and the Greek beaten into you, and maybe
That's
some
right.
Hebrew as well.
That's right.
But like
That's
the Latin
Almost
and the
certainly.
Greek,
yeah,
really, really. So by the time Tolkien was a high schooler, he probably could have breezed through the Summa in Latin. Wouldn't have been very difficult for him at all, especially as a philologist, right? I mean,
that was right. That was part of a classical education, was learning Latin and Greek and probably some Hebrew as well. Yeah, if not, and being able to read all of the quote seminal or important texts that they all cohere. This is what everyone's missing. They keep talking about the Western canon. It's like, yeah, but they all cohere together in a way. And that is maybe the best and only justification for saying Judeo-Christian, even though I highly disagree with that concept. That's probably where it comes from. And in that aspect, in terms of the written word and what is tied together, that would be correct enough, right?
Yeah, I'm still not sure they were reading Aquinas directly. There was a great revolt against the schoolmen, especially in the 18th century in Protestant countries, right? 17th, 18th century in Protestant countries. They were like, we're done with all of this scholasticism. We don't want to have any more to do with it. We've got the new sciences here. So now I think in a classical education, they definitely would have gotten Plato and Aristotle. And so they would have had all these concepts. I don't know if they would have gotten the concepts via Aquinas. It's
it's probably something we could look up. But I think even at Trinity in Dublin, they were still teaching Aquinas.
Yeah, and that's fair, and that explains kind of why I've heard some Catholic, like for example, are you familiar with the Catholic blogger Ed Fazer?
Yes, good old Ed Fazer. He Mary Harrington read his book and got these concepts.
Yeah, I've heard him cite people like Chomsky and stuff as supportive of his criticisms of materialism, but Chomsky's really just ripping off of Aquinas, apparently.
Oh, well, how about that?
Apparently, I haven't read Aquinas, but from the way you're describing this idea about the subconscious, it seems like he has.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible, and I mean, if you're just attentive, you might get to the correct answer via a different way. But
right,
if it's written down in the book already, like that's pretty easy for a simple country priest like me. So
yeah, that's what's more significant, is that if these ideas are true, you don't need to read the book to get to them, right? Because they're true, right? That doesn't mean that you can do it by yourself, we'll say, or at all ever, because maybe you just can't tell truth from not truth. That's possible. It's probably the case for most people. But also, it's also in the book. So and that's why dogma is important, and things like that, because you got to have starting points to reason these things through. And I mean, all of these newer concepts are not new. They just seem new because nobody introduced you to real history. Nobody introduced you to Plato and Aristotle, and then Aquinas, who refined those ideas. These ideas have, quote, evolved over time, and everybody misses that. And instead, they call the change they made last week when they had an insight evolution of an idea, when that's ridiculous. It's not how the evolution works. It's an improper use of the word, and they should know better. And they don't know better, which makes them bad scientists and nothing else. It doesn't make them smart. It makes them bad scientists.
All right. Well, enough of that bad science. We're doing the real stuff here. We are starting with solid starting principles and deriving sound conclusions from them. That's what scientia means in Latin. So,
excellent. Also, you got to be careful where these words come from. Consciousness is a brand new word.
Yeah.
It's
just when you pointed out that nobody has a definition for it, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. I know what it is. I do it every day, but I can't talk about it. That's why I just talk about being behind my eyeballs, And like, I wonder what it'd be like to be blind. Where would the seat of your consciousness be? Would it be in your fingertips?
Yeah.
Like that's a phenomenological conversation for another day, maybe. But
well, that's in the video on my Discord in important videos. That whole, they have a quick discussion about consciousness and the fact that no one's got a definition. So it's good to know, like, we're talking about something we can't define, and maybe that's okay, but also you can't define it, and therefore you can't do science on it. You shouldn't be using it in your scientific anythings.
Well, so the thing with regards to where the center of gravity of consciousness is complicated, but I do know there are some neuroscientists like for example Dennett himself, who say that there is no inner Cartesian theater, that like consciousness is basically distributed across different parts of the brain, and the feeling of a unified sense of self is kind of an illusion created to separate an organism from their environment.
Yeah, and he just made that up. So
yeah, I mean that's gobbledygook. Then he shouldn't use the word if it doesn't exist, but he does, and he bases all his stuff on a thing that he admits doesn't exist. That should tell you everything you need to know about his theory right there. Yeah, he's full of garbage. He's making stuff up, and what he's talking about is impossible. Right? He's not just wrong. He's telling you things that cannot be correct. Different problem.
yeah, and like maybe we should just start speaking of the mind anymore. That's a nice, because conscious it's got a Latin, of your conscience, the thing that bugs you, and orients you towards what's right and wrong. And then you had mens to talk about, oh, that's an interesting word. That is a present active participle, I think. It's very close to one in Latin. I just nerd sniped myself. Hold on. We are pulling up Whitaker's words here. We are going to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, it's a real problem. It's the difference. Like science is ego versus eco, which is a slide in the aforementioned video, which I thought was brilliant. Eco is connectedness and ego is dissection, basically. And they go over all that because that's what the people were discussing in the 1920s and 1930s, the great men, not the normal people.
All right. It's just a noun, a boring old noun, but it's third declension, which means it's old. So that's nice.
Boring old nouns. The world needs more accurate, boring old nouns, though, Father. So
I wonder if a noun in the third declension that ends in ns in the nominative wasn't at one point a participle. Just because that ending right there is a participle ending.
Yeah.
And like it got turned into, because participles are already kind of nouny, Yeah. So turning a participle into a noun, like being, it's not that hard, really.
Yeah, well, and you're only supposed to do it with one word. I think that was the only thing I really learned from Latin, but it really helped me once I found out sum es est, sumus et sunt. Oh, wait a minute. Why is that word like that in Latin? And no other words in Latin are like that at all. And I was like, oh, it's pulling some kind of double duty here in the language, like as a language tool, right? If you can think of it that way, this is a language tool, a special word, no other words like it at all. Nothing even comes close. And it's like, why is that? What is that? And that's the thing that draws the two together, right? Dr. Mary Healy? I don't know. Who's that?
She's a Catholic biblical scholar, and I wouldn't be disappointed to see her at a conference like this, but I would be surprised. So
there were a ton of Catholics, though.
Yeah. Which where were they? Where were they in Tarpon Springs? I felt like I was all alone there.
You were all alone there. But no, Father Joseph from Logos, he was there. Good stuff. I'm not ever going to listen to his podcast, but I can't understand any of the stuff he's saying.
Mark. You don't need any other priests. You have me. All right.
Exactly. I have the meta priest. All the others are nothing before you, Father. So there we go. At least from my perspective. Yeah, I wouldn't understand a word he's saying. So.
All right. I had her for a class in seminary. She taught in Detroit. So
cool.
It was a 3-hour night class, and I consistently stayed awake for it. So it was good.
Good for you. Good for you. Are you looking forward to your last year?
I'm looking forward to being done. Looking forward to some of the fun things that I can do in Washington, D.C. But I really just gotta grind this last thing out. Get my my thesis done, finish up the classwork, pass comps, and then go to Boston with my parents and get real patriotic for the semi-quincentennial.
When is that? When are you going to Boston?
End of July. End of July. That's when we settled on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be so I'll be done with school at that point, and I'm going to drive up there. They're going to fly in. They'll have access to a car if we want it, but I think we're going to do public transit just because I've heard about driving in Boston.
You don't want to drive in Boston, and there's no reason to.
Yeah.
If you're on the public transport system, there's absolutely no cause to.
Yeah.
And unless you want to visit Vermont and New Hampshire.
I'm good. I'm there to see Boston.
Well, that you can eat up an infinite amount of time just visiting the city of Boston. There's so many things, especially with the Riverwalk now. Oh my God, that Riverwalk. And I guess the tall ships are coming back, and the tall ships are a lot of fun, especially with the new Riverwalk. They're amazing.
Okay.
So yeah, that's great. That's great. Are we doing anything other than the other thing you were talking about there?
This summer?
Yeah. Do I have to drive up? What are we doing?
Flights to Colombia really aren't that expensive. What are you doing on the 4th of July?
I'm not doing anything that I know of.
Okay.
So
that's a 3-day weekend for me. So
well, we can get the back room ready and no problem. Pick you up at the airport, right down the street. So
yeah. All right.
You're always welcome.
We'll talk. We'll talk. 4th of July in South Carolina. It'll be fun. It'll be hot, but it'll be fun. Although I looked at the weather, it's hotter in Fargo this week than it is in Washington, D.C.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we've had weird weather already. And then now we've got a bunch of days of rain. And then we're going to the Cape on Thursday. So, yeah, it's been weird. It's not hot here because it drops between 12 and 4 degrees every time from 3 miles down the road. Thank goodness for that.
You might be outside of the Columbia Heat Dome.
Yeah, we're right outside the Columbia Heat Dome, like by a couple of miles. Yeah, even the school that's a mile away, I can get 5 degrees off just driving a mile. Yeah, I don't.
Nothing like trees replacing asphalt to improve the climate.
Real lucky. Oh yeah, and you can feel it. Even this year, I already felt it once because I've got the pole shed, and you go into the pole shed and you can just feel the ground's not radiating heat because of the pole shed and the trees. And it's like, oh, the pole shed's quite nice actually, because the ground's not radiating heat. But you go anywhere else in the shade, and it's like because there's so much heat in the ground, just welling up, killing you.
Yeah. I've thought that if we're gonna start investing in solar infrastructure, the first place that you go on is Walmart parking lots, right? And it's brilliant, right? Just run the AC off of the solar panels, and when do you need it the most? When it's hot? When are you getting the most electricity? When the sun's making things hot? It's just
well, they do
that, and then you get shaded parking lots, and everybody would be so happy about that.
No, they tried that with roads, and everybody pointed out why you don't do that on roads, and it's because asphalt is the cheapest and most recyclable material that mankind has. And when you put cars on things, they break reliably, especially roads, because you have trucks. And when you have cars on the road, no matter how much sun there is, you get no sun. But actually in Europe and in a bunch of US cities, they put solar on the roofs. Well, maybe above would be okay.
Yeah. Like 15 feet above, you've just got like walkways, got solar panels set up, and like you would have all the infrastructure. It's just
super expensive. The roofs make sense though. The roofs make sense.
All right. Well, I don't know. I don't know enough about this. I'm hoping that this is the real Ron and not some fake Ron.
It's the real Ron. I turned off my I turned off my camera so that it saves my Wi-Fi. Otherwise, I get all roboty. Hi, guys.
It's better to have your Wi-Fi angry at you than your wife angry at you. So.
What's it saying? Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah.
That's it's a good saying. Doesn't do everything for you, but it can help you out of certain things.
first off, two things. First off, hi guys. And Mark, I am curious, how was the conference? Because I couldn't go.
It was good.
But yeah.
Yeah, it was really good. It went super well for me. I couldn't have dreamed it would go that well. Cleveland is a pit. Don't ever go there. But no, the conference was great. I met a bunch of new people. A bunch of people came up to me. The talks were pretty good, except for this. We want to redeem postmodernism, even though that's not possible and it's nothing but pure evil. You know, other than that, it was really good. I mean, Richard Rowland subscribed to my channel in front of me, so got him. Yeah, it was great. It was a good conference. There was a lot of good people and good stuff there, and there was only one really bad talk. So that's pretty good. You know?
All right. Was Dr. Mary Healy? I don't know if you know who she is, or
no, she wasn't. She was not there.
There was it was a Dr. Mary Harrington. Are you are you getting your wires crossed there?
Maybe. I thought, no kidding, I thought Dr. Healy, it was supposed to be one of the speakers. That's what.
No.
Oh wow. Okay.
No,
maybe I got my wires crossed. Okay, maybe I got my wires crossed. Because
she was good, but she was only there for like one day, I think. And then she gave her talk and flew out, I think, because she wasn't on the panels and stuff. Yeah.
Well, you know, she might be taking raising her child seriously, and I can commend that. You know, only so many days with grandma back in England.
Richard Rowland was out with the plebs instead of hanging out in the VIP area, so that was kind of cool because he wanted to smoke with all the boys.
Mark could have been there with my pipe.
You could have been, but you were busy.
I was.
What kind of pipe is it? A church warden, or just like?
I've got a Molina, and I've got a Turkish pipe. And I've got a little corn cob, but I don't smoke the corn cob all that much because I think it's falling to pieces. So,
all right. Well, I only had a bong, so that was the closest thing to a pipe. But that doesn't.
Tobacco, pure Captain Jack tobacco. Oh, Captain Black tobacco.
Yeah.
Just want to be clear. It's a once a week thing, just a little treat.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
But isn't correct me if I'm wrong, Fuzzer, isn't tobacco in its raw form really expensive?
No, pipe tobacco is not expensive at all.
Okay.
A pipe might be the cheapest way to consume nicotine, right? It's also just really inconvenient. That's part of the reason why I do it, right? Because, like, you know, it's just too easy to rip on a heater, you know? And I would want to do it all the time. So, but like if I've got to sit there, I gotta like pack the thing, you know, then I gotta use 2 matches to light it, you know, and then I gotta sit there and like puff on it enough to keep it hot, but not puff on it so often that it gets really hot and like starts melting. And then I gotta do that for like 40 minutes, you know, 40 or 45 minutes at a time. You know, it's just inconvenient enough where I'm not gonna do it constantly. And it won't have, you know, that bad an effect on my health, I think.
Yeah, it's healthier to my understanding, like because it doesn't have all those chemicals.
Yeah, no, they just slice up the tobacco and throw it in bags. So yeah. That's a little treat, and so
it's the heat that gives you the lung cancer, but whatever, it's fine.
It's the heat that gives you the lung cancer. Okay, well, I don't even take it into my lungs, so it's.
Well, it'll give you mouth cancer too. I gotta find that article. That was a brilliant article this guy wrote about his studies that are completely ignored. But yeah, basically they showed that even if you drink, it was a rite of passage in some Amazonian jungle tribe, right? And they had this hot drink, and they thought the thing that was causing the throat cancer later in life was the hot drink. And so they tried to isolate the components, and then eventually someone got smart and did a test with water. It turns out, no, if you just replace it with scalding hot water, they all get the same incidence of cancer. It's not a chemical problem. It's actually, if you burn your freaking throat when you're 15, the odds that you're going to have cancer when you're 30 or 40 or whatever it was are really high. It's that simple. Like, oh, wow.
Well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing I never smoked, and I've never liked drinking. Like I when I was little, my dad would give me sips of beer, and it tasted like yak piss. I always would spit it out.
That's because it is yak piss. That's what beer is.
No, it's just fermented barley, right? Fermented barley water. But you know, part of the reason why your dad would keep the beer around is that, you know, you wouldn't be tempted to drink it if it, you know, like if he had, let's say, Mike's Hard Lemonade, you know, you'd be real tempted to drink that because it just goes down too easy, you know. But
there you go.
If he's got Bush Light, you know, then he's not going to you're not going to go get into that and drink all of his stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a good thing that he likes beer, because that's disgusting to me.
Yeah, you drink it enough, you start to learn how to appreciate it. Gentlemen, there's something that I need you to appreciate. I need you to appreciate that I'm going to be in the car for 10 hours tomorrow. I need you to appreciate my need for a good night's sleep tonight. So even though I can look out and see that the sun is still up, I need to begin the winding down process right about now. So this was a really useful discussion for me. So thank you. We will be back next week, and we will be back again for the full 2-hour time slot, but we will begin at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So moving from Central Time to Eastern Time. So good night, and God bless you all.
Good night.
Travel mercies. Bye-bye.